Hello and welcome to a men's only edition of the Citadel of Hype podcast. I know that may trigger some people in the chat, but we booted Gemma off the podcast. Kidding. She's actually at the cottage this weekend, and we still wanted to do our Friday podcast. So we brought in our local, not local to where I am in the lands of always winter, but we'll say local, A Song of Ice and Fire expert, Robert In Deep Geek. And today we are going to be talking about Theon Greyjoy. We're going to be discussing the Ghost in Winterfell chapter. We're going to be talking a little bit about his low point. I've had some low points today. My power went out of my house. I stubbed my toe and my knee, and I thought it was appropriate that we would discuss Theon today because it seems our lives are quite in parallel at this moment. But without further ado, I would like to introduce my guest, Robert In Deep Geek. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, and it's great to know that I'm your token English person today. It's an honour to step into Gemma's purple shoes. So if you don't know me, my name's Robert. My channel is In Deep Geek. Do feel free to go out and check it out. I'm sure Kyle popped it down somewhere in the description. But I'm delighted and honoured to be here.
I just got worried for a moment that I forgot because there is some sort of blue moon thing happening today. All the links are in the description of this video, including a link to Robert's new channel, Well Told Tale, his Patreon, and all of that as well. So, Robert, let's start off. John St. Baptiste did deliver a donation. Thank you, John. I believe he's off to a concert. But we will start off with this chapter. What are the main themes of this chapter, you think, Robert? The Ghost in Winterfell for Theon Greyjoy.
Yeah, so I think we need to start with the title. So this is it's called Ghost in Winterfell, and normally when we have one of the main characters, it's their name is the name of the chapter. But here we get Theon's going through this whole series of different names in the same way that Arya has as well, and it's kind of reflective of who he is rather than who he is inside. It's a reflection of who he is at that moment in time. And at that moment in time, he is like a ghost. The previous chapter he was in was called The Prince of Winterfell, and that was kind of an ironic thing. And now he is being this ghost. He's kind of ghost walking through Winterfell, this place that he once ruled, and now he's just a nothing. He's just a shadow of his former self. So that's the first big theme, is who Theon is. And the second thing I would kind of draw to your attention is that we shouldn't take this chapter in isolation. This is part of a massive set of plots that are going on in the north. There's this whole grand northern conspiracy thing going on with the Mandaleys that perhaps we can get into in a moment. And there's also a huge plot going on with Stannis and Melisandre and Mance Rayder in the books, who is there hiding out, pretending to be this bard called Abel. So we can't take this in isolation. And what's going on here is not just about Theon. Theon is the observer on what is happening in this chapter.
So one thing that is really interesting is when we look at the title of the chapter, Robert, it's not A Ghost in Winterfell, it's The Ghost in Winterfell, which suggests that he could be so detached from Theon and Rick, he is truly become nameless in the situation where he's viewing everything like you said, all these murders are going on. I kind of have a theory that he might be committing some of these, and he might be regaining his Theon-ness, his Ironborn culture, and he may be shedding Reek a little bit. But you think that it's actually the Spearwives, and they're kind of creating some havoc within Winterfell.
I do. And in terms of his identity, the next chapter, which is the last Theon chapter we have in the published books, there's obviously a pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter. That one is called Theon, and in my view, that is when he becomes himself again. This one, the big plot that's going on is we've got Winterfell, which is currently held by the Ramsays, and it is being snowed in to the extent that the gates themselves are being frozen shut. There's somebody that they're wanting to chuck out of the castle, and they can't because the gates are frozen shut. That's how frozen in it is at the time. And in this, there is a series of murders. And everyone, first of all, it starts out, these seem like accidents, and people kind of like go, yeah, well, these things kind of happen in this kind of like warlike situation. But then it starts to become apparent that these are not accidents. And I would be interested, Kyle, in hearing why you think it might be Theon doing it, because my theory, that I'll happily give a whole load more information on in a moment, but my theory is that these are being committed by Mance Rayder and his spearwives, who are there on a secret mission from Melisandre, and they are there trying to rescue who they think is Arya, who in the books actually is Jane Poole, who is taking the Sansa role that Ramsay's wife. So they are there stirring up trouble in Winterfell, killing off a few people, turning the factions in Winterfell, because it's not a happy camp. They're trying to turn them against each other. So that's my theory, and I think that it's nearly confirmed in the next chapter, the Theon chapter, that is the last Theon chapter in the published books.
One thing I do want to mention is for this chat, when me and Robert usually go live, we do try to be interactive with the chat. So yeah, we are having a discussion, but if you guys have any questions or amazing comments, we will pull them from the chat. And there's actually a really good one right now, Robert. Misty306 says, at Azor, Ahype, and In Deep Geek, both Arya and Theon become ghosts because they lose their identities. And Westerosi's believe both Harrenhal and Harrenhal, yes, to be haunted, and Winterfell not to be haunted. So this is something that's pretty interesting too. I actually mentioned this to you before the stream, how the writing was similar in both of these chapters. That when Jaqen is basically fulfilling the 3 deaths to Arya when they're in Harrenhal, this is kind of very similar. It has that same vibe.
It does, and when we're saying that Winterfell isn't haunted, Winterfell above ground, we might think that is the case. Winterfell below ground, every single time people go down into the crypts, we get this idea of there being the ancient Starks, the previous Starks, who are there judging people as they go in. It's the language is very similar every single time, whether it's people actually going down there, as Theon did, I think, in the previous chapter, or whether it's in a dream. And interestingly, the Spearwives, who I'm blaming for everything in this chapter, the Spearwives actually go to Theon and start asking him about the crypts. How do you get in there? What's down there? What's going on? And all the rest of it. So there are some references, but Misty, yes, I agree completely. Yes, there are. The way that George R.R. Martin is writing both of these characters, and Sansa in the books to an extent as well, is getting away from their original identity, and they're going through a period where they're not being themselves, and so they're sort of a ghost of themselves. Theon is the most radical example of this, because he actually does not believe that he is who he is here. He is always telling himself that he is Reek. You get Arya, who is trying not to be herself in a way, and you get Sansa, who is very aware of who she is, but she has to put up a pretense of who she is. So I think that there's a lot of these characters that George R.R. Martin is juggling at this point in the books who are not who we originally thought they were, or are pretending not to be who we originally thought they were.
It's really interesting. I thought when I read this chapter, it's easier to see him as Theon and and less than Reek, I would say, in this chapter. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he only reminds himself once of his name, and it doesn't even sound super convincing. So that is something that was, like you said, Robert, the preceding chapter obviously is named Theon, and we do think that Theon is going to regain some of his Ironborn strength and some of his more forward-moving demeanor. But that's another thing that's so interesting to me, is because you just talked about identity loss and people changing throughout the story, and obviously people have to hit a low point. And this is definitely happening to Theon, but I think we still see that glimmer that George is starting to really insert that. And I've always felt for Theon, so I've always been sympathetic. I know some people aren't, and I know Robert's going to have something to say about this, but this excites me. So, Robert, what's your take on that?
No, I actually agree with you. I think the reason I'm smiling is that I don't think it's here that we see the real Theon. I think it's in the next chapter, because in the next chapter he does that jump that we saw him and Sansa do on the show. He does that with Jane Poole, who is this person who is pretending to be Arya. Long backstory there. I'm not going to get into it, but she's pretending to be Arya, and he escapes. But just before he escapes by jumping, his thought process is, oh, Ramsay might find me if I do this, and then he jumps anyway. And that for me is the moment at which he becomes Theon again, because he is actually rejecting who all those fears he had all the way through. It's like, oh, Ramsay's going to find me, Ramsay's going to do this, if I do this, Ramsay will do that. Now this time at the end of the next chapter, that is the point when he jumps. That is the time when he becomes Theon again. And we see a little bit more of that in the Winds of Winter preview chapter. He's still clearly, because nobody heals overnight, he's still clearly very mixed up in himself. But he is then aware of who he is and what his name is. And he's not just saying, I am Reek all the time. So that is the moment for me when he changes.
The gods are not done with me yet, Theon answered, wondering if this could be the killer, the Night Walker who had stuffed Yellowdick's cock in his mouth and pushed Rogar Rastwile groom off the battlements. Oddly, he was not afraid. He pulled the glove from his left hand. Lord Ramsay is not done with me. The man looked and laughed. I'll leave you to him then. So it's George is trying to let us know that Theon is whether he's going to get sacrificed. The Winds of Winter chapter seems that there's some pretty interesting stuff in there. Obviously, Bran probably communicating with Theon. We think, Robert, are we on the same page as that? You think?
I think Bran will be communicating with Theon. I think Bran in the preview chapter from the Winds of Winter, you get ravens appearing and they're talking and they're repeating stuff that's happening, and they're encouraging Stannis bizarrely to take Theon to a weirwood tree. It's an odd kind of dynamic that's going on there, and that I think is when Bran is going to come in. Here, yes, you get whispers of Bran, hints of Bran. We see him, he goes to the weirwood, and then he thinks whether or not Bran might be talking to him. But I think Bran is going to come into play more than a whisper when we get to the Winds of Winter.
So obviously this is a little bit different in the show, Robert. We'll come back to this chapter in just a second. Do you think that the trajectory is going to be similar for the books for Theon? Because there's obviously quite a lot of different stuff that's happening. We know that Stannis is going to do battle with the Boltons. Whether he lives or not, we don't know. We know that Asha is there, and she's captured by Stannis, and that's very interesting. Jon is dead right now, as far as we know, or at least in Ghost. So there's a lot of dominoes that have to fall for things to happen. Now, the show has suggested that Jon has enabled him to pursue whatever kind of redemption arc that he wants. It's not up to Jon. He said it's up to Theon, essentially. What do you think is going to happen there? Do you think that Theon is going to make it to that final stage, even past the Winds of Winter, perhaps? Some people think that he's actually going to get sacrificed. I don't think so. Personally, I think that he's going to make it much further. The cripples, bastards, and broken things kind of sentiment, where these people are left picking up the pieces after the War for Dawn. The so-called Ragnarok of Westeros. What is your thought on that? Because the show has taken quite a different direction, and the books we don't have a ton more information.
Yeah, I think in most things, the books will end up in the same broad place that the show does. So with Theon is on a redemption arc. It's a cliche way of saying it, but that's what he's going through. He reaches the bottom point at some point in this book, and then he starts to pull himself back out. Now, he's got caught up in this huge Stannis, Melisandre, Mance Rayder kind of plan, which is going to unravel a little bit because A, Jon is dead, B, when the person that they think is Arya and they're sending up to Jon to try to appease him and say, hey, we're on your side, here's your sister, it turns out actually isn't Arya, and C, there's a whole lot more snow than Stannis was expecting. So that's going to get a whole lot more complicated. But Theon will end up in roughly the same place, I'm sure. He's going to survive, and I wonder whether he's going to survive because the information will come out that actually he did not kill Bran and Rickon. The reason why Stannis wants to kill Theon, and this is the whole plot of that preview chapter from the Winds of Winter, is that Theon is Stannis's captive. And the reason why Stannis has got him captive is, well, firstly, he wants information from him, but secondly, he knows he has to kill him in order to get the Northern Lords on his side. And so you get this whole long conversation saying, well, I am going to have to kill you. I just have to work out when and how and why, because you killed Bran and Rickon. Now, alongside this, we've got Bran, who will probably be in some way interacting through the weirwood that the crows are trying to get Theon to. And we've got Rickon, who is part of the Great Northern Conspiracy, and the Mandalese have already sent Davos in the books to go and try and get Rickon. So we are going to get some confirmation that Theon did not kill those two Starks. Therefore, Stannis will not need to kill Theon. It's quite a complicated plot that's going on that George R. R. Martin has built up there in the north, but the end result, I think, is that Stannis will not have to kill Theon, and so he can then release him with Asha, Yara, to go off and do roughly what they've been doing on the show.
That's very interesting. And kind of getting them under his wing, sort of, to do something that he wants. I think that's very interesting as well. One thing that really stood out to me about this chapter as well, Robert, is there's almost a supernatural feeling to it. Did you get that vibe too?
Yes, there is, but that's I interpret that as being about the point of view that this chapter is in. This chapter is from the perspective of Theon, who is, as is described by the chapter title, the ghost of Winterfell. He is not himself, and so he's almost kind of dream walking through what's going on. He is seeing things almost in a kind of a haze as he's doing stuff, and so he's going, oh, there's a murder over there, and then he moves on. Oh, there's another murder over there, and he kind of moves on. He doesn't really take it to heart, and I think that is why we get this kind of supernatural feeling, because we do not quite understand exactly what's going on. I think we get hints of it in the next chapter and start to get a bit more of an understanding of it, but in this, from Theon's perspective, he does not really know who he is, and people do not look at him and respect him because of who he is, and therefore he is this ghost moving around that people are not really acknowledging for who he is, and he is not acknowledging for who he is.
So one of the things actually that we talked about before the stream a little bit is Roose Bolton, and one thing that we did, you mentioned, Robert, is in the next in the Winds of Winter sample chapter, we are seeing Theon getting a little bit of himself back. But what's really interesting is that obviously in the show, Roose gets killed by Ramsay, and Roose seems a little bit more uncomfortable in his own skin in this chapter, and it seems like he is not as in control of Ramsay as he might think. What do you think about that? Because that parallel of Theon and Roose kind of not being in complete control, and then Roose going on the downturn, and maybe Theon going on the upswing. That is kind of something that George is playing with.
He is, and through all of this, we get Ramsay, who is completely in control of who he is and what he likes and wants and all the rest of it. And so Ramsay is going to be the one who takes complete control of the situation. The same again, it's the echoes of what happened in the show. Ramsay is going to be the one who's going to charge out there and try and engage Stannis in a battle and all the rest of it. That is what's going on here. Roose is not anymore the person who is in control of Winterfell. This is going to be Ramsay who's going to be doing this. So yeah, I think he's playing with this idea of the switch of power between Roose and Ramsay that we can see, and we're seeing all of this through, and to take a step back, all of what George R.R. Martin writes in A Song of Ice and Fire is through the perspective of whoever the chapter is named after. Everything we see is from that person's perspective. We do not see Ramsay's point of view. We do not see Roose Bolton's point of view. We only see what Theon is wanting us to see, is believing, is thinking about. And so that is what is happening here. And so everything that is transpiring is actually being filtered through this ghost-like consciousness. And so that is why it has this kind of ethereal feel to it. And that is why some of the characters who are not Ramsay, who is the foremost person in Theon's mind, have got a slightly less strong kind of presence than they might otherwise have. If you looked at Roose when you were looking through Ned's perspective or through Robb Stark's perspective, he was a really strong character. But when you look at it through Theon's perspective, the really strong character is Ramsay. It's not Roose.
What's really interesting too is that obviously Theon is brought in as one of the candidates for these murders. Robert, you talked about how this chapter kind of feels like a murder mystery, and one thing that Roose, he wants to keep everything quiet, and then Ramsay completely opposes that, and he actually spreads word of the murder. So he directly undermines Roose right then and there, and that's kind of, we saw a little bit of that in the show, obviously, but that kind of beginning too, and that changes Theon's situation too. You know what I mean? Knowing that Ramsay might eventually, because when you look at psychopaths and sociopaths, when their behavior shifts to a level where they can't revert back, like Ramsay's crazy, but he's going to take it up a notch to where he does something that's so despicable and so terrible, it will just like be so frightening and crazy. He will become a completely different, almost like a nightmare, I would say. So I think that there's going to be a transformation with Ramsay to an even crazier level, to an even more scary level as a character. And I think that Theon kind of gets out of there at just the right moment.
Yeah, I agree. Although simply looking at Ramsay, if you take what he does, just on that scene on the show, if you remember that scene on the wedding night, Sansa's wedding night with Ramsay, and he kept Theon there in the corner, and it was an incredibly traumatic scene. If you read in the books what happens there, it is even worse. And I'm not going to say exactly what happens because that I would demonetization. I don't want to do that. Yeah. But basically, Ramsay gets Theon involved in what's happening as well. So so Ramsay in the books is this incredibly horrific character, and I think that yes, he will come to the fore even more, but he's in the fore at the moment only in Theon's mind, not in terms of the actual plot, if that makes sense.
All right. So everyone, let's do some shout outs in the chat. We've been talking for a little bit. Usually we do our shout outs at the beginning, but we're going to jump into the chat and see who we have here. And for those of you wondering why Gemma is not here, her and her husband and her kids, they're enjoying a lovely weekend at the cottage. And I will actually be going to our family cottage this Sunday, so there will be no stream this Sunday. Sorry, that's why we've done back-to-back streams Thursday and Friday, having a family reunion. And my grandmother is really slowing down, so we think that this might be be the last one for her. So we're trying to all get together, have a barbecue, have some food. But that is what Gemma is doing this weekend. She certainly earned it. She's been working really hard, and she's relaxing. But we got Robert. He's not chopped liver. He's one of the most handsome men on YouTube. So he will be, like I said, continuing.
I think because clearly everyone knows you are the most handsome man on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm not showing my hair today. It's an absolute disaster. It's not working out. We got the original David Adams. We got art girl Laura D. Talmascadan staying in. Awesome. We have Livia Joseph, Storms and Mandolin, Scotty, Anissa, Daisy Kowalchuk, Amanda Duncan, Richard. We got Richard in there. We got Misty Scott McCloy, Catherine Reed, Welsh Woman. There's Tam Hutchins. And I know I'm missing some people. There's Raylene. I know Rayanne.
Do I have to give a shout out because she's saying some very nice things about me? Hi, Laura.
Laura's awesome. Maura Lee, who I believe can't be here this evening, who supports both of us. Robert, shout out to Maura, JR Rally, Legal Jedi, Scott McCloy, and everyone who's hi, I'm Allison, Mama Ogre. All the regulars are here. One thing I did want to bring up, Robert, is we have a friend of ours in the Song of Ice and Fire community named Lucifer means Lightbringer. He's an incredible guy. I got to hang out with him at Con of Thrones, and something really crappy is happening with his channel right now. Most of you know that I went through demonetization for like a long time. I went like 6 months. I made a fraction, like 10%, 15% of what I would usually make on YouTube. And they basically gave me no explanation for almost 3 months as to why it was happening. I was trying to contact people, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, Lucifer means Lightbringer's channel has been demonetized. He doesn't know exactly why, and they're not giving him answers. So what I would like to do is, if we all can, and I know the majority of you out there know who Lucifer means Lightbringer is. He makes great content. If you could go send him a message on Twitter or on his on his YouTube, or if you want to go support him on Patreon, he really needs our help. He's having some issues with YouTube, and YouTube quite isn't coming through for him right now in solving this issue. So Lucifer means Lightbringer. David knows I support him wholeheartedly, and as Robert as well. But I just want to give a shout out to him, and for anybody out there that didn't know that this is happening, he is being affected by this right now. And yeah, YouTube, yeah, man, get it together and help out David. That would be awesome. Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo that. I had a couple of people have pointed out I had LML on my live stream yesterday, and the situation that all of the YouTubers that you watch are in is that we are dependent on an organization for a lot of our income. Now, some of us have got different income streams, and we do day jobs and all the rest of it. Some of us don't, but the money that we get from YouTube is a huge amount of what pays our rent, basically. And what happens is it's the equivalent of your boss saying to you, right, I'm going to stop paying your wages, and I'm not going to tell you why. You can appeal in a month's time. That is basically what has happened, and it's just it is an incredibly tough position to find yourself in as a content creator. And this is why I always try and encourage people to support people that you value on Patreon. So LML I had on yesterday, and I was trying to get anyone who, I don't want to coerce people into doing stuff, but if you value what LML does, the best way to support him is to support him on Patreon, because that is not attached to YouTube in any way, shape, or form. It's a steady income. Similarly with Kyle. Kyle, yeah, everyone knows I'm a big fan of Kyle. He's a good man, and a lot of his income actually is dependent on YouTube, but if it can be skewed over so that it's more on Patreon, then that means that people can provide more of the content that you want. So that's my take on this. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever for LML to get demonetized. It was a bizarre decision. he is the most original creator that I know in terms of Game of Thrones out there, and he was done for, I can't remember the exact word, but
duplication of
duplication. So
which I mean, like for anything, like his stuff is not like there's no duplication there. It's not.
Exactly. So it's a complete lottery here. And I know, Kyle, you've experienced it before. LML's experiencing it now. I suspect at some point in the future I will also experience it. So it's if you can't afford to support LML, please just send them a message of support on Twitter, because that actually means so much more than you could possibly realize, just to know that people are on your side. So yeah, anyway, rant over.
Yeah, we don't want to LML. We don't want to continue forever, but we kind of wanted to mention that because David is a good friend of mine. I'm gonna see him in California in 9 days. That kind of looks like a P. My 9 should be nicer than that, but I adjusted it from 10 earlier. But I'm going to see George R. R. Martin in literally 9 days in person. I'm not trying to brag while Robert's on here or anything like that. But let's get back to the discussion. So Robert, let's talk a little bit more about the chapter, and I think we should open up to the chat for some questions, and then we'll kind of go with that. But LML, hashtag help LML, everyone. Chrissy of Oldstone, JR Raleigh, mods in the chat if you want to put his Patreon link to his YouTube, all that in the live chat, we can do that. Robert, so let's kind of give an overall statement of the chapter, and then let's move into some questions from the chat. What made you like this chapter so much, and why do you think it was one of George's awesome chapters?
Well, for me, first of all, yes, I'm jealous of you going to see George R. R. Martin. Let's get that one out of the way. I'm saying no more. Why do I think this is a great chapter? Why I think this is a great chapter because this is a masterpiece in him showing us stuff without telling us stuff. And I think he is showing us the grand northern conspiracy with the Manderleys. I think he's showing us what is happening with the weather, which is a huge amount of what's going on in the north. I think he's showing us what's happening with Mance Rayder and the Spearwives, and I think he's showing us what Theon's mental space is. But he never actually sits down and tells us any of those things. He lets us read into what is there and understand what is happening. What we see is Mance Rayder, who has gone in there and is sowing discord, and the Spearwives as well. They're sowing discord within Winterfell, but we're never told that is what they're doing. We just see the actions. What we see is Theon, who is slowly but surely he's being approached by the Spearwives, who are treating him as a person, and that is starting to break down all of these barriers that he's had to build up as Reek. And he is starting by saying, no, don't touch me, but eventually is getting to the point where he can actually talk to people. And that is huge. And that is why I personally like this chapter, because it is all about showing what's happening without actually telling us. We have to be intelligent readers and read into what is in the text.
Yeah, and just like the atmosphere in this chapter is so amazing. George is always so descriptive, obviously, of food and locations and all of what's going on in the background. But the feel of this chapter is just so, like, the air and the atmosphere of the chapter feels quite supernatural and like murder mystery type of vibe. We see that kind of different air in the Forsaken chapter, where it's like, kind of a love letter to H.P. Lovecraft and Cthulhu, and George likes to do this with specific chapters when there's a specific point that he's trying to make. So I think that's going to do it. We could have went way more in depth, obviously, about that chapter. I'm sure we're going to discuss it again at some point. But that's going to do it for that. And I think that, what we wanted to do is we kind of wanted to do half of the chapter and then, half of chapter stuff for the first part of the live stream, and then kind of move into some questions for all of you. I see there's been a bunch so far. I've been trying to keep some of them. I got one. We'll start off with this one, Robert. Mama Ogre says, what do you think about Theon surviving to the end game? I think that Theon's going to survive personally, but I know that you think there's a big chance that he might die.
Well, there is a chance he might die, but I think on balance, he's most likely to survive. And I think that he is one of these cripples, bastards, and broken things. I think we have to understand in terms of the storyline, we've seen his storyline all the way from the beginning to where it is now. And some characters, when they die, there's a clear point to them dying. When Robb died, yes, that was a huge shock, but there was a point to him dying. If Theon dies now, there's no point. We didn't actually get anywhere. So I think he has to finish off in some way this redemption arc. So he will end up facing off with Euron and coming to peace with the Starks. Those are the two things that he needs to do in order to get some kind of redemption or peace. So at the moment, we actually don't have that second bit, which we had on the show, because he was rescuing Sansa and he came to some sort of peace with Sansa. And I think he has to have that, because he doesn't have that in the books. In the books, that actually isn't Sansa. That's not even Arya. That's Jane Poole, who's just a random other. And he needs to meet one of the Starks and have the Starks in some way say, it's okay, I forgive you. And that is going to be quite an emotional moment for him in building up who he is. But yes, I think he, on balance, probably will reach the end game, because he has a personal journey that he has to go down.
So, I mean, Theon obviously thought what happened on, and I'm just using the show for reference for this one, what happened when he was standing there to sense. I think he wanted to help, but knew if he did that he would be risking both of their lives right then and there. And obviously there was a better opportunity when it happened, so he did take that opportunity. So we can essentially say the first time was kind of the first try, but he couldn't. The second time, they obviously got out of there because he killed Miranda. And then the third time, I think, he's to truly redeem himself, he's going to have to try and save his sister, because his sister made the attempt for him and got to kind of return the favor there. So that's something that is incredibly interesting. And I think that obviously a lot of people have contested the scene between Jon and Theon in season 7. You're both a Stark and you're both a Greyjoy. I freaking love that scene. I thought Kit Harington and Alfie, especially Alfie Allen, crushed it. That was one of my favorite scenes in the whole season.
Yeah, I mean, that scene was about not just forgiving Theon, but it was also a message for Jon, and that was prefiguring or foreshadowing this idea that Jon was saying to Theon, you can be both a Greyjoy and a Stark. And that was actually the message for him. You can be both a Stark and a Targaryen. So that was that whole message was two ways in that scene. It was a good scene.
Because there's a lot of inner conflict within both of these characters. I mean, most of our POV characters have inner conflict. And one other thing I thought I loved about that scene, and there isn't even a question about this scene, but we're just bringing it up, but is the word of Ned Stark beyond the grave. We see the impact of Ned Stark nearly 6.5 seasons later. In that scene, it is still so powerful. And I think the last episode of the series, we may still even see the impact of Ned Stark and the sacrifice that he made to bring Jon home and protect a motherless child. I mean, we're going to see a similar situation. We have another great question from Scott McCloy. He says, "What episode do you think we will get the Theon versus Euron sea battle?" I know what I'm going to choose, Robert, but I'm going to let you go first.
I mean, soon is the answer. So episode 1, the focus of episode 1 is going to be up at Winterfell. This is my view. It's going to be up at Winterfell. It's going to be all about the iterations of when people arrive, and we're going to get Dany and Jon arriving, and we're going to get what's the reaction of Sansa and the Northern Lords, and at some point we've got Jaime, who's also moving up there, and all of those are moving up separate to the Khalasar that's moving up as well. So that's going to be the main focus. But yes, Euron is heading off to try and get back Yara, sorry, who...
I do that every single time. I did that last time with Gemma, and she's just like, Yarsha. Just say Yarsha. I'm like, okay.
It was only because we were doing book stuff. So yeah, Yara. Let's go with Yara. So I think
Yara.
it's gonna be episode 1 or possibly episode 2 when that is. So the reason I say that is actually because of what we need Euron to be doing, and Euron needs to go over, collect the Golden Company, and come back. So if there's going to be a sea battle, it's going to be one way or the other, probably on the way back. And I think that has to be quite early on, because we're going to see the Golden Company do stuff in the first half of the season. So episode 1 or possibly episode 2.
All right, Robert, I'm going to disagree with you, which happens often, and Robert is often more correct than I am. But here's what I'm going to say, and I'm going to go based off some filming news. Miguel Sapochnik, who filmed The Winds of Winter, Hard Home, The Battle of the Bastards, he's slated for episode 3 and episode 5. I think that the episode 3 is going to be the Battle of Winterfell. That's apparently one whole episode that's going to be 90 minutes long. And I think the episode 5 is going to be the Battle for King's Landing. Here's how I see this going down. I think that there's going to be 3 battles simultaneously at King's Landing. I think that 1, there's going to be the Clegane Bowl in the throne room, wherever Cersei is, between Jaime Lannister, Arya, Brienne of Tarth, and Sandor Clegane and his brother, and Cersei and maybe Qyburn, some other people there. Jon and Daenerys will be on their dragons fighting the Night King, and that will be going down with the Army of the Dead. And then I think there will be a Battle of Blackwater 2.0 with the Greyjoys and Euron happening simultaneously. Now, I know this seems chaotic, but I think it's gonna go down like that. I think that because this is going to be the final battle of the whole series, I just think it's just a gut feeling that I have. So that personally for me, because he's directing those 2 episodes, it has to happen in one of those 2 episodes. I could be wrong, but I think that we are actually going to get a super epic sea battle, like maybe like 10-15 minutes of it or something in that episode. So I think it's actually going to happen at King's Landing, and I think that Euron is going to die in episode 5, and Theon's going to kill him by drowning him or getting an arrow in the eye. So I don't know if that's tinfoil enough for the chat. I haven't checked the chat in just a second. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I'm going to jump in a little bit there. So I think actually there are going to be 2 bits to this in terms of the Theon Euron thing. I think Theon has clearly gone after Euron, and I think that they will clearly have some kind of battle while Euron is going to and fro across the Narrow Sea. I think that is going to happen, but there has to be some kind of final showdown. There has to be some kind of who's actually going to be ruling the Iron Islands after all this is gone. And I think you're right that will probably be in episode 5 or maybe even episode 6 as one of these let's clear everything else up after the Night King has gone, which is I think what an episode 6 is going to be about. But the first confrontation is going to be early. Otherwise, what on earth is Theon doing for the first 4 or 5 episodes? He's just like sailing around looking for Euron.
Yeah,
there will be some kind of confrontation early on, and then a final confrontation later on.
Okay, I can dig that. I mean, either way, I do agree with you on the episode 6. All the knots are going to be tied. I don't think there's going to be some sort of final conflict in episode 6. I think that's all going to. I mean, just the way they've structured the episodes, Robert. It's happened in the episode 9s. What we had 7 episodes last season. It kind of happened a little bit different last season. I think it's definitely going to happen in episode 5. All the major conflicts. So we got some more questions, Robert. You want to pull one from the chat?
Sure. So let's try and find one. Scott McCloy agreeing with me. Great, love that. What else have we got going?
By the way, Robert, before we get into the next question, next year I'm coming to visit you and Gemma in UK for DragCon. Me and Gemma have talked about this, and there's going to be Richard, who plays the Night King. There's going to be Sir Barristan Selmy, the guy who plays Sir Barristan Selmy. The guy, James Faulkner, who played Lord Tarley. And there's going to be Miltos, who's a friend of me and George's. He's going to be there. And announcement, I'm coming to UK to visit next year, Gemma and Robert. And we're going to go to a convention. Robert, I know I'm just looping you in on this now, But that's what's happening.
Amazing. Sounds like a plan. I'd love it. It's amazing. Carl and I. I know I'm reacting kind of weirdly. Carl and I have talked for ages about when you're coming over. Oh, why don't you come over for the con? Why don't you come over here? Maybe we'll do something for next season. And now he's telling me he's made a plan, and I'm definitely going to DragCon, which I've never even heard of. But this sounds great. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's like a throw. It's only a couple of days, but there's many UK. I mean, I would say I think like 30% of my viewership is, I think 29 or 30% of my viewership is from UK, that area. So there's a bunch of people that will be going to that. It's in London, as far as I know. But you know, I've been talking to George. He might come, but I'm for sure coming. And me and Gemma have already talked about it privately. We'll get something going, and we'll arrange some. We'll have to arrange some sort of super meetup podcast event vlog hangout thing with scotch and beers. Okay, let's get to a question, Robert.
Loving it. Sorry, apologies if I was slightly weird there. That sounds like excellent plan, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to, and if George comes across as well, then it adds a little bit of class to the whole proceedings. You've actually had a super chat while we're here.
Oh, we did. CC Stark. Will Yara be the Silent Iron Queen, book or show? Could she have her tongue cut out, Robert?
Yes, she has indeed had her tongue cut out. That's just, well, I say that with great certainty. I don't know, but I think that's probably quite likely, only because that is what Euron does to his prisoners. He cuts their tongues out, and she noticeably didn't talk in the second half of the last season. So I think, yes, she's had her tongue cut out. I wonder whether this is actually a hint to where we're going to end up with the sort of the governance of the. I can't see Euron surviving, particularly so in the book. He's such a crazy character; he cannot survive. On the show, I think he has to mirror that, so I don't think that he's going to survive. And I wonder whether we're going to end up with this kind of team, a management team for the Iron Islands of Yara, who's clearly more of the leader, but she can't speak, and Theon, who wants to be a leader but doesn't actually have those skills, but he can speak. And so whether they will be able to work together in some kind of a job share partnership, I don't know exactly how that's going to work, but I do think that might be a hint to where we end up with all of this.
Yeah, it would make sense. Yara's able to reproduce and Theon's able to speak. They've kind of already made that agreement in the show that Theon would follow kind of her set of principles as to go forward with the Iron Islands, but also Yara yielded to Daenerys and said that they would change their culture and what is going on over there. So that will be definitely a really interesting scenario to see what happens there. And certainly in the books, I think that one of them could die because George is probably going to kill one of them. But who knows? Both of them could maybe survive, and we could see some sort of maybe Theon the latecomer type of situation, or Torgon the latecomer type of situation with Dion's story. I want to say Theon the latecomer because I think that he's going to become Theon the latecomer. Robert.
Yeah, so all I was going to say was that someone in the chat was just asking, so are you, for this drag con, are you going to be in drag as Khaleesi?
Listen, people, I'm looking straight into the camera for this one. I agreed to dress up as Daenerys Targaryen on Halloween. Don't push your luck, all right? I agreed to Halloween only as Khaleesi. But if you keep on pushing it, there will be an issue, okay? So I agreed to Halloween on this Halloween party. By the way, Robert, you're invited for that. I don't know. That's going to be pure chaos. I don't know what's going to happen with that. Apparently, we're all jesting. It's Gemma's idea, so it'll be pure chaos because it's Gemma's idea.
This is a live stream party. Love it.
Yeah, it's going to be a couple weeks before because Gemma's gone somewhere. She's traveling on actual Halloween, so it'll be like an early Halloween party.
Gemma's having another holiday. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah, she's having another holiday or something. I don't know. But on we're going to everyone feel welcome to dress up and join us. We are going to have some sort of Halloween party about a week or two early. And I will be dressing up as Daenerys Targaryen because all of you have hassled me so much and wanted me to do that. That's the only reason I'm doing it, really. Okay. I think Kyle should dress up as Robert, and Robert should dress up as Kyle. Whoa, that would be weird. Okay, let's move on to another question.
I don't look good in baseball caps. Sorry.
Oh, Robert, that was savage. Why did you have to go there? Wow.
No, I don't. I'm saying I don't look good in baseball caps. That's all I'm saying. You look amazing.
I actually think you could look good in like a forward, like one of those like pre-curved ones. I think you could pull it off, like, because you're famous, right? So I mean, you put on one of those caps and you walk through the streets and people don't notice you, but they're like, "Oh, In Deep Geek," and they're like, "There's that famous YouTuber," and then like because you have the hat on, you're trying to be like all stealthy and stuff, and
maybe to the side. I think maybe I could pull that off.
And the stream. Oh my god, I can't. That's really I just picture that in my head, and just Sanrixian. If you're gonna watch this later, please draw that somehow and send that to Robert. By the way, I am wearing a Sanrixian t-shirt. It just came in the mail today. It says "The North Remembers." This is her art, and you can check it out on, I believe it's sanrixian.com. She does sell a bunch of her art up there. So thank you so much for sending the awesome gift in the mail. It made my my day quite awesome, with my power going out and me almost breaking 2 of my computers and smashing my knee and all sorts of other things today. Robert, let's get back to the chat. We'll take a few more questions. We got some pretty good ones.
Yeah, sorry, I'm getting caught up by all these Halloween costume suggestions about me being Arthur Dane, which I think is amazing.
That would be cool.
Yeah, well, if somebody wants to buy me armor, I'd be very happy to do that.
Somebody set that up.
Okay, so we've got Michael Smith asked, do you think Theon has any bastard children around Winterfell or with the captain's daughter? Go on, Carl, you can do this one.
Captain's daughter, yes. Winterfell, no. He may have one. I don't know if they're going to set it up like that, though. I don't think Theon's going to have an heir.
I think I would agree that I don't think it's going to be an issue. If he has, I don't think we will know about it in either the books or the show. The captain's daughter is quite possible because they kind of hinted at it maybe as being a thing, but that's not going to be anything that affects the plot in any major way, would be what I would say.
Yeah, it could be a thing, but I mean, I don't think it's going to be some sort of like major thing that's going to affect the story in any way. Yeah, I really don't think it's going to happen anyways. Let's see if we got some more questions. Oh my god. Yeah. You guys are hilarious. The chat is just, there's so many memes in the chat right now. It's just people are being so unprofessional. Wow.
Just basically they want you to keep the beard when you're being Khaleesi.
Yeah, the beard is staying, but it's gonna stay at the like kind of length. I'm not gonna grow it out to like a super huge unkeepable length anymore. And this hair, I'm trimming it a little bit. It's see how it's doing this little curly thing. It doesn't like to cooperate with me all the time anymore. So I know I got the nice Jaime Lannister golden of hair, but it becomes quite frizzy in the humidity.
I think it's a nice curve, I would say, to your hair. But what I would say was the beard. If you just like get it just longer like this, just all the way down.
Okay, stop. And by the way, everyone, if you are enjoying this video, we do have 62 likes. We have 111 people watching. Please hit that like button. And like I said, if you are enjoying my guest this evening, I'm sure he's been on the channel many times. You can find the link to his new channel, Well Told Tale. He's doing narrations. Are you doing War of the Worlds first, Robert?
Yeah, so those who haven't encountered it yet, so my second channel is basically me doing audio narrations of the best science fiction, fantasy, speculative fiction stories ever. I'm starting with the War of the Worlds once a week, long form, uninterrupted by adverts during the reading. Each of the episodes so far have been about 45 minutes. We started with War of the Worlds. Next up, it's going to be Frankenstein, and we're just going to move through all of the classics, basically. So it's just going to be me reading stuff. And if you like that, do check it out. The Well Told Tale.
And then also you can find his Patreon, GoFundMe to help support this second endeavor for Robert. Link to his channel, his Twitter, and all of that in the description of the video. All the links are, there's like 5 of them all together down in the description. Speaking of second channel, everyone, news, the Marvel channel will be launched within the next 8 or 9 days. Blaze Manga is making the branding for us. We got the copyright for the name of the channel, and it's called Marvelous, like the word marvelous. We got a lot of cool stuff that's going to be happening. I can't tell you exactly everything that's going to be happening with the channel, but we're going to have some guest content creators on the channel. It won't just be me. It won't just be George. There will be Blaze Manga. Gemma is going to be doing some Marvel content for the channel a couple times a month, different types of videos. So there's going to be speed drawings from Blaze Manga. Gemma is going to be doing some narrations. I'll be doing theory videos. There'll be a podcast, and we're really excited for that. And like I said, I'm going to be going to Worldcon, which is going to be science fiction, fantasy novels all over the place. But we're going to DragonCon, where there's going to be, I think there's 10 different Marvel actors there. There's, oh my God, people from the DC universe, Arrow, Jason Isaacs from Harry Potter, played Lucius Malfoy, John Noble from Fringe, and we're going to be there. We're going to be covering all 5 days of DragonCon. You can support the channel by donating to the GoFundMe. We still have quite a bit of time, I think a few more weeks until we get to that. But Robert will be back in just a moment, everyone. We are going to continue with a few more questions, but do check out Robert's channel, like I said, and the links to all. Mind you, we don't have the link for the new channel up yet. We're still doing some stuff. That will be set up very soon. We're just getting all the branding done and whatnot. So let's take a couple more questions in the chat. We're going to take like 2 or 3 more, and I'm just going to copy and paste some. Robert just, there he is. He's back. One from Brenda Starr. Robert, do you think that any of the prophecies, such as the dragon must have 3 heads or the Azor Ahype theory, will really come into play, or will there be a twist as to how the Night King will be defeated? I think that there's definitely going to be a twist, but as to the prophecies, me and you have different views on this. So
yeah, and your view's wrong. So let's just move on. Apologies. How the Night King is going to be defeated, I think this is going to be slightly different in the show and in the books, because I cannot honestly see George R.R. Martin, the avowed pacifist, having an end game where the solution comes by mass war and killing the Night King. I don't think that's how it's going to end. I think it has to end with some kind of agreement or pact. I think that is what is going to have to happen. But in terms of prophecy, the way that George R. R. Martin treats prophecy is that the most important thing is not actually the words of the prophecy. The most important thing is how people treat it and whether they believe it. It doesn't matter so much whether Azor Ahai is real. What matters is the fact that Melisandre believes it completely, and she has such a personality that is pushed forward the narrative of the story because of her belief. It doesn't matter so much whether or not Maggie the Frog said a prophecy which was true. Incidentally, I think hers is probably one of the more true ones, but I think what matters more is the fact that Cersei believes it completely, and that is pushing her along a different path. So the way that George R. R. Martin treats prophecy, and I think the way that he wants us to be looking at it, is not, are these things true? It's, do characters within this story believe them to be true?
I'm going to use a page out of my life, Robert. I went through quite a lot with my back injury, people know, and then, you know, I was at this low point in my life where I believed that nothing could go right for me. At a certain point, I said, hey, I have to change my attitude or nothing will happen for me. And I think that ever since I adopted that attitude, and more, it's changed. You know, I'm still negative sometimes, but I try to be as positive as I can, and I try to exude positive energy or connect to people in positive ways. And the more I do that, the more I feel like I'm taking my own destiny into my own hands. I kind of agree with Robert on this in some ways. But I do think, you know, obviously George, there is a supernatural background to all of this. There is some twist in that. But I do agree with Robert in the sense that George is trying to show us that these characters have, even though they are, there are some bigger things at play. They do have their life in their own hands, and they still can make their own choices, essentially. And that's what it boils down to in life, honestly. I do really believe that, I mean, obviously there's circumstances that are not under your control. There's people that are born handicapped, or there's people that get very sick, and no matter how much treatment or how positive they are, they still pass away. But I think that what Robert is saying, there's a lot of truth to that. Wow, Robert, that actually hurt me to say all of that. I usually like to disagree with you, but
I know you do, but there are times when we both have to accept I'm right, and that's good for you to be in that place sometimes, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take
a. By the way, Joe, don't take it.
And by the way, everyone, me and Robert, Robert knows how to troll me in more ways than one, so he knows me pretty well. Let's take another. I mean, some people are saying, are you guys going to do cover Fire and Blood? I know Robert is going to do tons of that, and yes, I will be covering that on the channel as well. Robert, let's finish it off with one more question. Let's ask a question to me and each other, and then let's pose a question to the chat. Where do we want to end this today? Theon Greyjoy.
I think we want to end this with your cap on sideways.
All right.
It's a sexy look.
All right, let's do this.
So go on. Well, you're going to ask me a question, and then
let's get one from the chat. 1 second. PMO, positive mental output. Oh, yes. Ooh, here's a good one. And we'll finish. Actually, we want to finish with the Theon one. 1 second. I'm trying to scroll up here and trying to find one. Guys, send me Theon questions. We need one more question to end the stream. There is literally so many comments that I have to scroll up so far to find one. No, I still can't find one, Robert. Okay, here's one. I got one for you, Robert. Will Theon fight against a White Walker? Will his ships and his navy be an integral part for the War for the Dawn?
No.
Oh, man, I'm going to say yes about the Navy, but I don't think Theon's going to fight a White Walker.
Do you want me to expand? So, I mean, so my view is that there is something about either running water or open water or salty water that the White Walkers cannot cross. So I did a video on it recently. My theory is it's about the salt, but notwithstanding that, bodies of water seem to be a barrier to the White Walkers, to the others. And so I think that fleets actually are slightly outside of this game in terms of confronting the White Walkers and confronting the Whites. I think that that's a different thing. So will Theon be facing them? Well, he may a little bit in, as you say, episode 5 will be crazy and everybody's going to be involved in it and it's going to go all over the place. So yes, there may well be a bit of that. But in terms of the front line of the battle, that's going to start up north. The White Walkers are going to sweep through. It got foreshadowed last season. They're going to sweep through the last hearth, probably the Carhold, and then come to Winterfell. There's going to be a big rumble there. Then in the books, I think that they're going to head on down to the Isle of Faces. On the show, they've not really mentioned the Isle of Faces, so they're going to have another place, and that's probably going to be King's Landing. So that's where that's going to go. All of those places, until you get to King's Landing, are inland. So the boats aren't going to be so much of an issue. When you get to King's Landing, yes, the boats might be there, but realistically, we're talking about... we're not talking about the others, the White Walkers. doing another big invasion by the sea like we saw in the Battle of the Blackwater. That's not what they're going to do. We're going to have dragon fighting overhead. We're going to have armies coming in on the ground. It's not going to be a sea battle.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Robert, and we're going to end it there because I don't really think I could have said it any more eloquently. Robert is quite dashing when he speaks, and I have my hat on sideways. I'm going to put it on backwards.
You're very dashing with your hat on sideways.
Yeah, I'm going to change that just for the last part here. I'm actually just going to take it off even. My hair is an absolute disaster now. There you have it. This is going to end the stream today, everyone. I would like to thank Robert for filling in for Gemma today. Gemma says she hopes that everyone has a great weekend. She said she was going to try to pop into the chat. I said, Gemma, you go and enjoy yourself with your family. You have certainly earned that. But thank you for joining Robert today. Everyone in chat, let's show some hype and love emojis for Robert. But Robert, give us a little heads up on what's next for you, man.
Well, what's next for me? I've already plugged the Well Told Tale. Check that out if you're interested in that. On my own channel, then I've got 3 series going on at the moment because I'm big into the series on Game of Thrones. One of them is the Traveler's Guide. If you've not experienced the Traveler's Guide, that's just me going through the different places of Westeros and exploring them as a traveler would explore them. Secondly, I've got most asked questions. I've been doing this thing on YouTube for a while, and there are some questions that real fans of the show have that I think have not necessarily always been answered. So I'm going through a whole series of them asking questions like, are Tyrion and Sansa technically still married? Is Rhaegar really dead? Those kind of questions. And then thirdly, I've just started a series on my take on Robert's Rebellion, the Tower of Joy, Rhaegar, all of that stuff, which I think I've got a particular perspective on that hasn't been shown before. So I'm quite looking forward to setting that out over probably about 10 or 12 videos, to be honest, because there's a lot of information going on there. So that's what's happening on my channel. If you want to check that out, also I'm on all the usual places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find me as In Deep Geek.
And for me, there's a couple of different things that are going on. I know there haven't been as many videos going on, but we've been doing crazy amounts of planning. We just found out that we got press passes for Worldcon literally just a little bit ago, so that's really exciting. So Worldcon and DragonCon, we have press passes. We'll be covering both events. I will be so I was originally only supposed to be gone for 3 weeks. From the 12th of August till about September the 5th, but I am actually heading to Houston, Texas for 2 extra weeks. I will be going to see Blaze Manga, and we are going to be working on the Marvel channel, and I'm going to be dropping my DragonCon videos as soon as humanly possible after that event. So lots is happening, everyone. And like I said, thank you for everyone that has been so supportive of the channel. You can support the channel by checking out the Patreon link in the description of this video. Like I said, if you do want bonus podcasts, me and Gemma will be doing one early next week. All $5 patrons get to vote on what our episode will be about, specific polls for our bonus podcast. Of course, everyone gets the podcast, whether you pledge $1 or up. And yeah, you can help me get to Worldcon. All the support really helps, and helps go to new events and go to like see George R. Martin and vlog, and gets all sorts of awesome footage and interviews for all of you out in the community. But thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I'll think we'll finish with a hype and love from In Deep Geek, Robert.
Hype and love, everyone.
Hype and love.